Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast here with Jessica Bun Bun, and this is our Only Murders in the Building Season 4, Episode 7, reaction and review. Valley of the Dolls is the title of this episode. We are all now in the safe house, which feels like the least safe house of all time, which also feels like it is attending somebody's Christmas party where you turn around and there's suddenly like 200 people there, and you're just like, how did this happen? There was only 2 people here when I showed up.
Yeah, and they're eating the food, and somebody's getting into a fight, and everybody's drinking. Yeah, no, it really did feel like it was some sort of holiday party. But yeah, the safe house turned it into the unsafe house as, oh, sweet Howard told
Yes.
everybody where they were.
Or is it, oh, sweet Howard? Question mark.
I know.
For those of you who are kind of like the Howard is behind everything theorists out there, and we've talked about these theories and videos
Yeah.
before. I mean, we're certainly not immune to it. I mean, there's so much evidence in this episode that like, oh, he's just stirring up all kinds of trouble for the trio. He's just sending everybody over there while, claiming that he's doing some good work here and investigating the checks, where it's just like, are you playing both sides, Howard? What's going on here?
I was really surprised. I mean, I know it's a TV show, but if they are in fear of their life, that
Yeah.
they are like, oh, we're going to go all the way out here to hide out at Charles's sister's house. As soon as the first person showed up and it was like, oh, Howard told me, it would be like, cool, it's time to leave. Because if
Yeah.
Howard's going to tell this person, he's going to tell more people as what happened. And I'm surprised that they weren't like, okay, we just need to leave.
There are a lot of questions that we're going to have throughout this
Oh,
particular
this
video
episode.
about this episode. But we also, of course, have the jaw-dropping reveal at the end of all of this that kind of, just like we suggested on this
Mhm.
past episode, everything is, in fact, connected. There are huge tendrils that go all the way
Yep.
back to season 1 here.
Yeah, we were talking about this in our last review with the connection between the I'm watching you note and the I'm watching you text that came in. You talked about Winnie, like
Mhm.
there's a lot of loose threads still sitting out there that are connected to season 1, and we'll get more into all of that, as well as some beef. I'll just put my beef hat on and I'll leave it on for this whole video that we are going to get into at the end of this review of why this is one of my least favorite episodes of the entire series. So stay tuned for that. But before we get too far into it, hit that subscribe button. We are here 3 times a week talking about Only Murders in the Building. We have reviews and previews on Tuesdays. We have theories every Wednesday. We're also covering From here at the channel. If you're interested in another really fun mystery, and we've got Grotesquerie.
Yeah.
Teacup is coming up this week. Sweet Pea's coming up this week. There's a lot going on here at the channel. So thank you so much to everyone who has hit that subscribe button. It really helps us.
Yeah, we really, really appreciate it. I'll even go so far as to say with the theory video on Wednesday, 9 a.m., this is not one you're going to want to miss. I don't want to
Yeah.
say too much else. I don't want to I don't want to spoil the content here. This one's going to be really, really fun. And if you guys do want to support us further, join our Patreon. We've got a link in the description below. We are covering the Penguin exclusively over there. We're having a really, really fun time with that show, chatting about it with patrons as well. So thank you so much for those of you who are supporting. We have a link in the description that is all about that.
Yeah, and thank you to all our patrons for choosing the Penguin, because our patrons get to vote on what shows we cover exclusively over there. So this ended up being a really fun show.
Yeah, we're having a really, really good time with it. And now let's talk about trying to have a really good time with the big reveals at the end of this.
Yeah, okay. Like if you are watching this show for the comedy of it all,
Yeah.
you were eating well. There was, so many huge, big named actors and actresses that were here all in the house together to be actually able to see everybody together. That was a treat. There was a lot of really great comedy that was going on. Molly Shannon was on fire telling off the actors.
Yeah.
There was a lot of comedy. There was a lot of really good emotional moments too, with Charles and his sister sort of talking about the spleen that she didn't need. There were some good things in there, but I felt like mostly this episode until we got to the end was pretty directionless. It didn't really bring us much of anything until the last, like, whatever it was, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, where they dropped all these different huge things.
Yeah, it felt a lot, and we'll get more and more into this as we go along here because you already have the beef hat on. There's going to be
My
enough
beef hat is on.
in here for a whole steakhouse, but we'll get more into it over time. But it did feel in general like this episode was a lot of the show just sort of bragging about how many famous people that it could put on screen at any given moment. And yeah, there were some really funny moments. What I will highlight as the best overall moment to me is actually something that I don't know this for sure, but I kind of feel like was a little bit ad-libbed, which was after the big Loretta proposal to Oliver, and the two of them are seemingly engaged, which does warm my heart. I do want to see a wedding on here at some point. Like, that would be so fun. Is that Oliver's immediate response is sort of suggesting to her, do you have any family money? And she laughs. It felt like Marty just came up with that line on the fly, and that was actually just Meryl Streep laughing because they have a good relationship. Like, that to me was really, really sweet and wholesome.
I hope that we get a wedding next season, and I really hope nobody dies at it.
Guys.
Yeah, no, I'm really worried about that. Like, my original theory, my tinfoil hat is on too, is that Jan is going to be the next person that dies on this show, that she'll be the big cliffhanger, that it'll be like, now that's like, oh, even more connections to season 1 and Jan and how she plays the bassoon and the note. I'm just like, okay, I feel really confident that she is going to be the person that is not necessarily behind it all, but is going to be the person who's going to, die at the end of this, and it's all going to come full circle. But could she die at their wedding? Please don't do that. Just give us a little bit of hope here and happiness.
Give us some hope. Give us some happiness. Also, I already watched the After Party season 2, which RIP the After Party. I'm the only person who watched it, but that whole season was about a wedding. So I'm just like, okay, I don't need another wedding murder mystery. What I also do need, though, are some more substantial clues about how this big reveal at the end of this episode came together, because here's kind of breaking down what it is that we have figured out. According to the actor trio of Zach Galifianakis, Eva Longoria, and Eugene Levy,
I'm already rolling my face.
everything is in fact connected to season 1, and that Saz was pretty well aware of a lot of these connections already. Now, like Jess said, we've already discussed how a lot of this stuff was seemingly connected, and this is part of my own misgivings, is that I didn't necessarily pick up all the clues that were on Saz's desk way back when. So I wasn't really going into this fully thinking that Saz was apparently as aware about everything as she was.
Yeah, so there was the Who Poisoned Winnie, and then on Saz's desk was Sick Pup, and that was sort of the connection there. Of course, there was the door note that, we got much deeper into in our last review, where the writing on this note looked very similar to what was sent in the text, or the white background, the way that it was written with the sort of thicker black, like almost like a Sharpie, is sort of kind of what it looked like. And then we had, Zach Galifianakis getting into his like, oh, but it's someone who's left-handed. And then, Eva getting into, oh, well, I took some bassoonist lessons and like, I know a little bit about this. And Jan was, not left-handed. And they did this sort of flashback to Jan playing the bassoon. And I was like, there is no way that any of those actors would know how she played that, especially from the view that we got, which was Charles looking at her through the window. So unless Charles took a picture of her out the window and put it in like the evidence box, they would never know that. They would never know that.
That's one of the many problems I have with the way that this reveal just functionally came together.
All right, let's just get into the beef of it all. Right. I'm here. I'm already rolling my face and just like, oh my God.
Do you want me to bring you a steak knife?
Yeah, here it is. We're beefing it. So my biggest beef with this episode, and why this is my least favorite episode of the entire series, And I'm not saying that it's bad. So before everybody's like, oh, how, oh my God, it's terrible. No, it's not terrible. No, it's not terrible, but it is my least of the entire series because it was the three actors that came up with everything. And I feel like as a viewer for me, I've been watching the show since the beginning. We've all been along with our trio who have been diving into these murders. And sure, they miss some stuff. They're not detectives, they are three podcasters, but they're pretty decent at what they do. And they have been able to connect a lot of things and figure out a lot of the people who have done it. And that's been really exciting for me as a viewer. I've enjoyed that quite a bit. So to get to this point where we are in season 4, and they didn't make the connection that some of this is connected to season 1. Okay, I would get it if they were like, oh man, we're too deep in it. We just, we can't see it. That was never said. Instead, we have 3 actors that have just popped onto the scene that are like, I took a handwriting course, so I know this. So I, played the bassoon for a day. So now I know everything. And I get that it's kind of like a, haha, actors are whatever. They had the whole scene with Bev Mellon being like, oh, good actors, whatever. I was just like, okay, you've set it up. But for me, for the 3 of them to be the people that make that connection, it left a bad taste in my mouth. If it was somebody like Howard, who has been part of every investigation in some sort of way, or a Lester who's been around, or an Uma who has been around, somebody who's been around, then I would have been more like, oh, okay, here's Howard showing all of his work and being like, this is how I think it's all come, if he's not, behind it all, this is how it's all come together. You guys missed it because you're too deep in it, but I've been around the whole time in the building with you guys, basically part of the pod. I'm the unofficial 4th member of the podcast at this point. Then I'd be like, okay, that all makes sense, that it's somebody who's connected to the building, connected to the murders in some sort of way, connected to the trio. You have all of this revealed by Eugene Levy, who doesn't know them and doesn't really know anything, has been in the building for a minute. Like, I'm sorry, no, I didn't believe it at all. And it made me feel really angry at the end of the episode where I was just like, no.
How dare you, John Hoffman? You have made Jess angry. I am also upset, by the way. This is not an exclusive to Jess issue.
Okay, there's a part of me that was just kind of like, I was wondering if anyone else kind of felt a little bit sour about it, where it was like, how are you guys just coming in? All this stuff. You have no way that you would ever know about this stuff, but you guys are going to be the ones to reveal that this is all connected to season 1. I was like, oh no, I don't like this. Anybody else feel sour about it? Or if you guys liked it, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, okay, here's the thing. Like, will I be able to accept it slightly better if they come back and it's like, okay, maybe the actors were wrong about some stuff and they got some stuff right? Maybe, but even still, it's going to be really hard for me, just because having these 3 suddenly be these idiot savants who are able to figure all this out amidst all the chaos that's going on in this house, when just episodes ago Zach didn't even want to be there. I mean, he was basically forced to stay on the project, and it's just all of a sudden these huge light bulbs are going to go off. And maybe they learned some things from listening to season 1 of the podcast. Maybe they figured out a couple of things, but to have them figure out all of it, it felt like
in one night.
The show was really going for the ha 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 ha, look at this, look how funny this is. And it produced a temporary laugh. But then I go back and, not to tip off everything with the theory video here, but I was doing some research for the theory video and going back and watching some of the earlier seasons. It's just like, tonally, that's not the sort of show that this was. It was a show that had a lot of humor, and, it still does, but it was also grounded in these characters and this building that we really came to know and love, and all of these people who are essential to it. You kind of touched on this already, but I think this could have been so much more of an effective reveal if this was a a Howard and Uma, where Uma's just sort of like, yeah, I don't want to help you guys, but I want this.
But I will get out of the building.
Yeah, I want this stuff to stop so I can go back and just live my life. And there still could have been humor in a lot of that, where you have the residents of the Arconia actually working to help the trio because the trio has helped them in many ways. They figured out what happened to Bunny.
Mhm.
They're trying their best. And I think that could have been a moment that was really kind of sweet and tender and still sort of funny. And maybe the actors could have contributed to some degree with that, with like maybe one thing, like maybe the handwriting thing. Okay, you guys have contributed to something, you've helped to figure it out. But to have it be everything, I just was pounding my head against the wall, where it's like I wanted this reveal. Like, don't get me wrong. We talked
Yeah.
about it. We
Yeah.
wanted everything to be connected to season one, especially because, John Hoffman has teased that there is sort of this larger Moriarty-esque figure. So
Mhm.
that's satisfying. The way in which that is delivered to us is very unsatisfying, because it's basically taking the power away from all these characters that we loved. And we haven't even mentioned people, like Oliver's son or Theo or these other
Gut
characters.
Milk Lady.
Yeah.
Like, this whole building is filled with so many characters that have all been involved in some sort of way or
Yeah.
around what's going on with the murders in the building. And then in comes Eva Longoria being like, I have it all figured out. I'm like, I want to have a ha-ha with you, but I don't have a ha-ha with you. I'm not having it. I just felt like really weird watching it. It wasn't satisfying as much as it should be,
Mhm.
to be like it's all been tied around. It felt like they had on these three huge iconic actors and they didn't have enough material for them to have them all season long, so they gave them this.
Yeah, it does feel like that's a part of what's going on here. And now the trio has to feel silly that they didn't figure it out themselves. And it's all really frustrating. But okay, I'm going to try to take off the beef hat
Okay,
for a
beef hats
moment
off.
and focus on, okay, what's actually going on here with this big reveal and who could be responsible? Because really, the list of people who might have been doing this from the very beginning is kind of slim. Now,
Yep.
we can say theoretically that, okay, it's a new character who was around in season one and we just didn't see them. They were off screen, but is that really going to be satisfying for anybody?
Or maybe they weren't off screen. I mean, we have had sort of like building meetings where we've seen lots of people that are all kind of there, characters that have kind of come in and left, like they've been around and there's people that have been around the whole time. So
Yeah.
it could be somebody that we saw at the meeting that maybe had a little bit more of a role before but hasn't had as much, like the Gut Milk Lady. We haven't
Yeah.
seen her at all, Ursula, this season, but that doesn't mean that she's not around. I mean, she's kind of in everybody's business, trying
Yeah.
to sell her gut milk, but that doesn't mean that she isn't doing other things or have seen other things.
I think the top suspects that we probably all are thinking about right now are Jan and Howard, just because
Right,
they have
right,
been around
right.
most of the show. And if we think in terms of screen time, the show clearly wants to have either important big names or important characters really tied into everything. Like, those are the first two spots we obviously have to focus on.
Absolutely. I know that there are some theories out there about Mabel as well, that she's
Mhm.
actually been behind it the whole time. I don't think so, but if that turns out to be the case, then that might be how they can kind of explain how the trio didn't figure it out, because she might be leading them on wrong paths
Mhm.
if one of the three is behind it the whole time.
The thing that makes all of this very, very difficult is the simple object that is Saz's phone, because that's the thing that kind of connects it directly to what happened to her. It would be
Yeah.
kind of easy to say, okay, this big bad is really just lurking in the shadows. They're not necessarily responsible for anything. But if you took out Saz and you go down to the incinerator, you burn her body, you're probably going to be pretty careful about whatever effects are left on her person. So I have to think, unless there's some sort of like weird trade going on, and I think that starts to get complicated, whoever moved her body is the same person that is in possession of her phone now and is doing all of this.
Well, okay, and this is where we get into the Westie Besties,
Yes.
because they have spent an awful lot of time with them over on the other side of the Arconia. We know that they're doing shifty things.
Yes.
You know, the trio has learned that through Howard that they have all been cashing Dudenoff's checks. I think we all kind of collectively feel at this point that they are somehow involved with what happened to Dudenoff and Dudenoff's death. Either they killed him and they're just pretending he's alive to keep their apartments and they put his body down the incinerator, or Dudenoff died. They came across it and was like, oh no, we have to make sure that he's still alive. So they put him in the incinerator and they've been cashing his checks and all that
Yep.
to make it look like he's still functioning.
It's obviously a reveal we needed at some point. It gives
Yeah.
this episode a little bit more of a punch than it would have had otherwise to sort of put it out here.
But I will say Vince having that second phone where he picks up and he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, hey, Dudenoff here sort of thing. I mean, could he also have Saz's phone on him? I mean, he certainly has a lot of phones going on. He's fine to be a little bit shifty with that.
Well, that's the thing. He's clearly a phone collector. I think we've also definitely have seen now that everybody over at the Dudenoff place has no problem, pretending to be somebody else
Yes.
or doing something as somebody else. And we still don't even know where Helga fits into all of this at this point. We've shared Helga theories in the past, like you've suggested that, Helga may have realized what was going on with these people.
I
And
was like, peace out.
yeah, and I've thought that, okay, maybe Helga's the person who actually took out Saz and that she got in there so she could have access to the apartment. But what's interesting about the Westie Besties at this point is that we technically don't know, okay, did they take out Dudenoff themselves? Did they just capitalize on a situation? I think either way, they clearly know a lot more than they're telling. And the fact that, okay, now they're aware that people are aware of what's going on here. What are they going to do about it? Because they're caught red-handed, and because we don't know that they're actually killers, like, are they going to then try to take somebody out?
Yeah, and I'm also wondering how the trio is going to deal with this now that they know, because they know that Dudenoff is dead. They know that Dudenoff was found in the incinerator, and they know that the Westie Besties have been cashing his checks. They're still living in their apartment. So I think the trio knows that they have to be involved in some sort of way.
Yeah.
So it's become much more dangerous now because either they killed him or they found him and then put his body in the incinerator, which is still pretty bad.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty fair at this point to assume that if none of them are responsible for taking out Saz, and I think that's still very much a hazy subject of discussion at this point. Like,
right.
Rudy supposedly has an alibi, but, does he? And you can kind of go
We
through.
don't know.
Yeah, you can
He
go.
just said it. I can say anything. So can he.
So, like, it's just one of these sort of situations where even if none of them are directly responsible for that, I think they clearly know who's going in and out of that apartment. I think they know more than they're letting on, and there might be a very particular reason why they're keeping that a secret. And I think that's something else the trio has to figure out from here. But everything feels connected in terms of connected to Saz, but then also connected all the way to season 1.
I wish that they had really spent some time in this episode talking more about who it was on set that, was behind any sort of this stuff, or any evidence or anything that they had come up with. There was just this one throwaway line. I was kind of, that's interesting.
Oh,
Bev says to Zach, boo-hoo, I got hit by a sniper. I'm like, why would you know that? Like, is there more information that's actually been given that, maybe the police, the detectives have come around, figured out exactly where everything is, that is, the same thing that has been used already with what happened with Saz? Like, none of that was really brought up. It was just this one line, oh, boo-hoo, I got hit by a sniper. I'm just like, wait, Bev, no, how do you know this?
That's what's making this season in part frustrating, because they're just completely forgetting about what happened to Glenn, what happened to Olive, not Olive, what happened to Zach. And it's odd to me. Okay, like, let's assume now that it's a sniper because Bev said this, but we don't have an update from Detective Williams as to what's going on here. You're so transfixed on this, and I get it, Saz is dead, nobody else is dead, but it kind of feels like there's some pretty clear evidence over what happened here that might be important to help you figure out what ultimately happened with Saz. I mean, for starters, Howard was around, doing his whole, like, making the documentary for the brother sister. So Howard clearly is not the sniper. I don't know how many of us thought that Howard was the sniper, but I think we can at least rule him out for that.
He could have hired somebody. I know that we've seen him where he's been like, "Oh, I'm a librarian," or "I'm now I'm working here, and I'm doing whatever, all these sort of odd jobs." But he lives at the Arconia, which is an extremely expensive place to live. So, where's Howard have his money? I mean, he's got money coming in from somewhere, and we don't exactly know where the bulk of his money has come from.
I think the thing I'm the most curious about, and I'm not to step too much on the theory video that's coming, but how much has all of this been planned from the very beginning? Because if it has been planned from the very beginning, there have been, I think, a few little clues that have kind of been dotted in throughout. And I hope there's a larger plan that was established then, and they're not making this up as they go along.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, if this is all tied to season one, as it seems to be, then there's a bunch of players that are just off the board now, like, a Bev Mellon or Marshall the writer, the brothers, sisters, like everybody on the trio actors, like all the people on the movie have not been here since the beginning. So there really is a much smaller pool of people that we can really be looking at, unless they do something where they just have somebody that was maybe at the meeting, the building meeting that we saw for like a couple of seconds, and they've kind of been lurking around in the background the whole time.
Before I put my beef hat on again.
God. Oh no.
I will give everybody a ha-ha moment here, because for the past couple of episodes in particular, I have been desperate to try to think that Marshall is the person responsible. And I don't know why it is. Or maybe it's just because they spent all that time with him putting on the fake beard. He's able to pretend to be other people. The Eternal Sunshine reference. Oh, maybe he's trying to forget something bad. But it's just like, I couldn't do it. And that's why this show and its season one connections are driving me crazy. And, they're, like Jess said earlier, there's not a lot of people who could be involved in all of this unless they're going to sort of like, I don't know, figure out some way to do mental gymnastics to have it work.
Yeah.
Okay,
you're putting your beef hat back on? Okay, all right. Everybody, buckle up. We're hitting the curve.
I could not stand the fight between Melissa McCarthy and Meryl Streep. Listen, it's funny in theory, and I know why they did it. And to quote the bird, I know who did it. I know why they did this, because they want to put this on TikTok. They want to put this on Instagram and be like, oh, look, it's, Meryl Streep and Melissa McCarthy getting into a fight.
Two legends.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny as an SNL sketch. If this was on SNL, I would have been dying. I would have lost my mind over it. Like, I've enjoyed SNL this season, and I'm a big fan of the show. It's just, in the context of what we're actually seeing, it did not fit in with what we know about Loretta's character. It did not fit in with really anything else going on. It did not need to be there. And this brings me into the biggest thing, which is technically Melissa McCarthy did not have to be on this show. She's not a suspect. She's not somebody who, we got a little bit of backstory of her and Charles. And once again, Melissa McCarthy, I love her. She's been great on SNL. It's just, none of this was actually necessary for this show. There were other safe houses they could have gone to. We have taken trips outside with the trio before, outside the Arconia. Like this, none of this had to be here. And it really was just them wanting a big name guest star, wanting some laughs. And it's just, parts of it went on a little bit too long for me. And I didn't, while the fight is funny, isolated from everything else, it just didn't work in the episode.
It just wasn't believable to me. I just didn't think that fight would have happened the way that it did, and the way that it came together. It was there for the ha-has. It felt very slapsticky and less like they were actually having some sort of fight. Obviously, this is only murders. They're not going to have it be like a real drag out fight. Nobody wants to see these two actresses in that spot on a show like this, where it is light-hearted murder. I don't even know how that's all coming together, but that's what this show is, right?
Yeah.
Like I said at the beginning, for me, it was like the first, however long of this episode was emotional and funny and took me on a ride to nowhere. Like, it is nobody that's there
Yeah.
is the killer. Nobody had any real information until we got to the very end. This wasn't leading us to anything except for the proposal.
Yeah, and the proposal was sweet and nice. I did like that moment. I just
Mm.
didn't necessarily need all of the other moments. I'm not sure we needed Melissa McCarthy's husband really at all.
Yeah, because here's where I am now, where it's like, okay, so they went to her house, to Charles's sister's house, to hide out.
Yeah,
Okay, that's fine. Howard told everybody, everybody showed up. Okay, cool.
yeah,
Are they then just going back to their Arconia? Because it's still not safe. So what happens? They're not staying where they are because
yeah,
that is also not safe. Do they move? They should be realistically just going somewhere else and hiding out and not telling Howard, but they're probably just going to go back to the Arconia. And
yeah.
we took this trip for, funsies.
They must just be, we're gonna go in, we're gonna show the Westie Besties what's up now. It's like, great. You're going to show the Westie Besties what's up, even though you don't actually know whether or not they're involved in any of it.
Yeah, you might they may actually be killers. Like, the
Yeah,
idea that the trio would go back and just, kind of put themselves in that kind of danger. I'm hoping that they're maybe in between, on their way
yeah,
back to deal with the Westies,
yeah,
that they will talk to Detective Williams somewhere in there along the way so that it feels a little more believable. Because for me, like, the idea that Charles or Oliver are going to go walk straight up to somebody who they think
yeah.
might have killed Saz and Dudenoff, like, then why wouldn't they just kill them?
Here's the biggest thing we should remember as we start to wrap everything up here.
Hmm.
Whoever's responsible from all of this clearly has links to season one. Clearly, they did not want the podcast to be going on at a certain point. They were fine to sort of issue some warnings to Jan. They
Yep.
clearly have some sort of way to get around, plant all of these bugs in various apartments. They clearly are well aware of pretty much everything that's going on almost at all times, and they've been able to keep this secret and plan it out like the long game that was suggested on Saz's desk.
Yes, this whole thing is about, to me, ending the podcast. Because not only was there, like, I'm watching you and then I'm watching you again in this episode, but there was also that whole note that was left with the left-handed writing that was like, end this podcast or I'll end you. So
Yeah.
a lot of it is somebody is working in the shadows and has been doing probably terrible things for a long time.
Hmm.
So, the Westie Besties are on the table with that. And they're worried that their misdeeds are going to come out into this podcast. This is about them stopping the podcast. And
Yes.
the same thing about the secrets that are possibly going to come out in the podcast. It's probably what's going on with this movie as well, and why Saz ended up getting got in this, because she just got too close to everything. I mean, she made that call to Bev to be like, hey, I need to talk to you about the
Yeah.
Only Murders movie. So, bad things are on the way. And we've seen that note. And this podcast, or I'll end you. It's the same thing with the movie. There is a secret about the Arconia or someone in the Arconia, and they need it to not come out. And that's what this has been about, I think. Okay. You don't live in the Arconia.
No, I do not live in that. No, I'm so jazzed about where I think this all could be going. I'm
Yes.
so excited to get into the theory video because we have some really fun stuff to get into there.
Yeah.
But thank you guys so much for talking with us about Only Murders in the
Thank you.
Building. We will have a preview for episode 8 up soon. So hit that subscribe button and support us further. Join our Patreon. We have a link in the description below. We're
Yep.
covering the Penguin exclusively there. Thank you so much to our patrons. We will see you
Thank you.
here next time.